Good evening and welcome to Sunset News this Wednesday evening. As always, we bring you news, community stories, economics, weather and sports. I am Diana Master. In the news tonight, government is considering declaring housing and sanitation a state of emergency. Prime Minister Elijah Ngurare announced in Parliament on Tuesday, acting on a directive from President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah. Delivering the statement on behalf of the President, Ngurare said 34 million Namibian dollars had been earmarked as an initial step to address sanitation challenges. In the past few weeks, Her Excellency directed that housing and sanitation be considered for declaration as a state of emergency. He said, "Housing and sanitation go hand in hand. You cannot achieve one without the other." He acknowledged that initial emergency funding may fall short, but it is a start to ensure that every Namibian has access to decent sanitation. He added that expanding sanitation infrastructure would also create jobs. The Attorney General has advised that the Disaster Risk Management Act, Act 10 of 2012, can be invoked to declare housing and sanitation as emergencies, Ngurare added. A meeting has already been held to discuss the potential declaration, and consultations with various committees found that resources currently available would be sufficient to address the sanitation aspect. The National Disaster Risk Management Committee is handling the matter and will report to Cabinet and thereafter to Parliament on progress made. Popular Democratic Movement leader McHenry Vanani questioned whether resources would be adequate. Vanani also raised the issue of unemployment. "We also have a motion before this House calling for unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, to be declared a national emergency," he said. In our next story, the Swakopmund municipality is verifying 713 taxes on its database, while traffic operators enforce against illegal operators, including Yango-linked vehicles, which officials say have become a concern in the town's public transport sector. Municipal Traffic Superintendent Trudy Goagos said the taxi census is not a new registration process, but a verification exercise to ensure that the municipality's database matches the taxis operating in Swakopmund. She said the municipality has been registering taxis for almost 10 years, but operators do not always report changes when permit ownership changes or when vehicles listed on permits are replaced. She confirmed that the 713 figure refers to taxis or permits currently registered on the municipal database. Goagos said the municipality does not expect widespread non-compliance with the census, as it is only a verification exercise. However, operators who do not participate will be investigated. She said failure to take part could indicate that a taxi is operating illegally or that the vehicle is not roadworthy. Goagos said enforcement is already taking place at the same time as the census. She estimated that illegal or unverified operators in Swakopmund are definitely not less than 50, including Yango-linked vehicles. According to Goagos, some Yango drivers or vehicles are operating contrary to requirements, which has become a growing concern for law enforcement. She said this is causing confusion and unhappiness from the legal and registered taxis. Swakopmund Taxi Association Secretary Elias Tobias said the association supports the census because it will help law enforcement identify illegal taxis operating among registered taxis. Tobias said the association's main concern is illegal taxis and some Yango vehicles. He said the association does not object to registered Yango vehicles operating through the app, but is concerned about vehicles marked as Yango allegedly driving around town using hooters and operating like registered taxis. The municipality previously introduced large taxi numbers to make registered taxis easier to identify. Goagos said the numbers are also displayed on the rear windscreens so that vehicles can be identified from behind. Education Minister Sanet Steenkamp says delays in student allowance payments were caused by universities submitting invoices only in April, forcing the government to begin processing non-tuition benefits months into the academic year. Steenkamp said while the government successfully covered registration and tuition fees at the start of the academic year, non-tuition payments were dependent on invoices. Her remarks came as members of parliament on Tuesday raised concerns about students being evicted from accommodation, missing classes due to a lack of transport, and facing uncertainty over their studies as payments under the subsidized tertiary education funding model remain outstanding. She added that government was dealing with thousands of applications that required validation before payments could be released. The minister noted that 156 million Namibian dollars was advanced to institutions at the start of the year without invoices to ensure students could register and institutions could continue operating. Since then, an additional 122 million Namibian dollars has been paid towards tuition and registration costs, 30 million Namibian dollars towards non-tuition support for about 6,436 continuing students, and 3 million Namibian dollars for outstanding obligations from the previous academic year. Government also injected 247 million Namibian dollars into the system to accelerate student payments, with disbursements expected to commence this week. Steenkamp said the ministry and Namibia Students Financial Assistance Fund, NSFAF, are working under significant capacity constraints while implementing what she described as a historic reform under tight timelines. The minister acknowledged frustration among students and parents, but maintained that institutions had been requested to allow affected students continued access to classes, examinations, and academic results while outstanding payments were being finalized. Steenkamp further disclosed that the reintegration of NSFAF into the ministry had exposed staffing shortages, with only 13 chief administrative officers handling awards and 10 accountants responsible for processing payments. To address this, 25 additional staff members have been appointed. The ministry is also exploring an integrated digital system linking NSFAF, higher education institutions, and the Home Affairs Ministry to improve verification and payment turnaround times. She assured Parliament that all outstanding non-tuition allowances for qualifying continuing students are targeted for completion by mid-July. And now, closing off our top stories, the Trade Union Congress of Namibia has warned of setbacks in workers' rights in Namibia. The warning follows the Global Rights Index 2026 by the International Trade Union Confederation, in which Namibia was again classified as a Category 3 country. This category refers to regular violations of workers' rights. TUCNA Secretary General Mahongora Kavihua said the rating had to be viewed with deep concern and sober reflection. He said it contradicted the constitutional guarantees and social dialogue that Namibia often emphasizes. At the center of the criticism is the Labour Commission. According to TUCNA, it has refused to register the Public Service Union of Namibia in the form requested by the union. Kavihua said this was not a technical matter, but a restriction on freedom of association and on workers' right to choose their own representation. TUCNA also criticized lengthy procedures around industrial action. Cooling off periods and other requirements could delay strikes to such an extent that they lose their impact. The union sees this as a weakening of the right to strike and collective bargaining. Kavihua called on government to review the PSUN decision, stop administrative deregistrations of unions, and reform strike-related procedures. TUCNA also called for a public review of the Labour Commission and urged the International Labour Organization to assess Namibia's handling of union rights. And that brings us to the end of our top stories. Stay with us after the break. We bring you our story of the day.
Namibia is a land of movement, with waves that never stop reaching forward. Here, adventure is not something we search for. It is something we are born into. In every corner of this country, creativity rises. From artists, from athletes, from dreamers. And when the world comes to explore Namibia, they discover something extraordinary. Because when sport moves people, creativity moves ideas, and tourism moves the world toward us. Something powerful happens. A platform where movement meets imagination, where industries connect, where opportunity grows, where Namibia's next chapter begins. Welcome to the Creative Sport Tourism Expo. Exhibit, partner, experience. Creative Sport Tourism.
And now getting into our story of the day. The Swakopmund municipality spent almost 20 million Namibian dollars on overtime during the 2024-2025 financial year. The amount is now under scrutiny after it was raised at the annual general meeting of the Swakopmund Residents Association last week. SRA chairperson Siska Howard said overtime was among the areas being examined more closely by the association's councillors. She spoke of about 2 million Namibian dollars per month and stressed that the spending was not limited to the fire department. According to municipal spokesperson Linda Mupupa, overtime payments amounted to exactly 19.87 million Namibian dollars. This equals an average of about 1.65 million Namibian dollars per month. The figure mentioned by the SRA was therefore broadly accurate, although monthly amounts could vary depending on operational needs. Overtime accounted for around 3.4% of the municipality's operational budget, which stood at $578.2 million. According to the municipality, most overtime is incurred in departments providing essential services, including water and sewerage services, the fire brigade, traffic law enforcement, and health services. Mupupa said these departments must also respond to emergencies, disruptions, and other urgent incidents outside normal working hours. These include water leaks, overflowing or blocked sewer lines, fires, and traffic accidents. The municipality also pointed to Swakopmund's role as a tourism, sports, and events destination. Staff are often required to work on weekends or after hours, including at events, during inspections, and in the management of public spaces. The municipality acknowledged that overtime remains an ongoing concern for the council. At the same time, it pointed to Swakopmund's growth and the increasing demand for municipal services. According to the municipality, it applies annually to the Ministry of Labour for approval of planned overtime. Howard said at the SRA meeting that the association's councillors had divided different departments and focus areas among themselves. Finance was among the areas being watched more closely. We'll now take a quick ad break and return with the latest in economic news when we come back. This week's decisions, today's debates, tomorrow's consequences. The agenda puts the spotlight on Namibia's most pressing issues and the people driving them. From headline makers to groundbreakers, we bring you the voices and perspectives at the center of the national conversation. One story, one interview, the depth you won't find anywhere else. That is The Agenda. Catch The Agenda on 102.com and on ntv.my.na. Tonight in economic news, Prime Minister Elijah Ngurare's call for a review of Namibia's home loan financing model could have unintended consequences if repayment periods are shortened without addressing affordability challenges, Simonis Storm economist Almandra Jansen has warned. Speaking at the Budget Reform Rollout Workshop in Windhoek on Monday, Ngurare asked why a 2 million Namibian dollar vehicle can typically be paid off within 5 or 6 years, while a house of the same value often takes 20 years or more to settle. He called for discussions with commercial banks on how housing finance can better serve Namibians. Responding to the issue, Jansen told Namibian Sun on Tuesday that the difference between vehicle finance and mortgage lending comes down to affordability, the lifespan of the asset, and how banks manage risk. A residential property is a long-lived asset. A well-maintained house has an economic life spanning several decades, while the land it sits on, in principle, perpetual, he explained. A vehicle, by contrast, is a depreciating asset with a useful economic life of roughly 8 to 15 years. Jansen said banks generally match the repayment period of a loan to the expected lifespan and value of the underlying asset. Financing a vehicle over 20 years would expose lenders to significant risk because the asset's value may have largely disappeared long before the loan is repaid. Affordability is another key factor. Using a 2 million Namibian dollar mortgage at an interest rate of 11.5% as an example, Janssen said repayments over 20 years would amount to about 21,500 Namibian dollars per month. Shortening the repayment period to 7 years would increase the monthly installment to roughly 35,400 Namibian dollars. Bank of Namibia Governor Epson Wanguta echoed a similar view on Tuesday, saying long mortgage repayment periods are largely driven by affordability rather than arbitrary decisions by banks. He added that borrowers who are able to afford higher monthly repayments can opt for shorter repayment periods. In our next story, global program designed to help developing economies cut industrial emissions while growing their economies. The funding would be unlocked through the country's Sectoral Transformation Investment Plan, which is being developed under the Climate Investment Fund's Industry Decarbonization Program. Speaking at a CIF-IDPS TIP stakeholder engagement session in Lüderitz on the 8th of June, CARA's Governor David Geertz said the program would help Namibia move from ambition to implementation. He said the plan would also support sectoral analysis, feasibility studies, regulatory reviews, and project pipeline development. Geertz emphasized that Namibia's green industrialization agenda had moved beyond policy discussion. The governor said the Karas region was well positioned to anchor that transformation. He said the region was expected to host the country's largest green hydrogen project, Hyphen Hydrogen Energy, and was increasingly being recognized as a strategic hub for a broader renewable energy and low-carbon industrial ecosystem. Geertz urged Namibians not to view green hydrogen as a narrowly focused energy project, but as a platform for industrial transformation. He added that the country's 6th National Development Plan, NDP6, called for a whole-of-government and whole-of-society approach to development, identifying wealth creation, improved equality, and employment generation as central national goals, and setting a target of 30,000 green jobs by 2030. And with that, let's take a look at the economic indicators. The Namibian dollar trades at 22.09 against the British pound, 19.07 to the euro, 16.52 against the US dollar, and 2 Namibian dollars and 44 cents buys you 1 Chinese yuan. All commodities are down save for Brent crude oil, which took an upturn of 0.49%, now trading at $94 and 87 cents per barrel. Let's head straight into our international news. Police in South Africa have launched a manhunt after 12 people were killed in a mass shooting at an informal settlement in Johannesburg. At least 10 suspects, heavily armed with rifles, entered the Jumpers informal settlement in the suburb of Cleveland late on Tuesday night and opened fire before fleeing in a white vehicle, police said. The motive for what police called a heartless and barbaric attack, in which another 9 people were injured, is still being investigated. Members of the Jumpers community believe the shooting may be linked to a turf war between groups of illegal miners living in the area. Illegal mining has been on the increase in South Africa, which is one of the highest murder rates in the world. Shootings in informal settlements are not uncommon, sometimes linked to gang violence and personal disputes. The local police department said its officers responded to a complaint of a shooting in progress at about 11:10 p.m. local time on Tuesday. It is alleged that more than 10 suspects were dropped off by a white Toyota Quantum near a patrol station in Cleveland, the police said in a statement. The suspects allegedly entered the informal settlement through both entrances and moved through the area, opening fire on residents and community members at multiple locations before fleeing the scene in the same vehicle, the statement added. Police said 8 men and 3 women died at the scene, while another man died from his injuries in hospital. At least 9 others were taken to various medical facilities for treatment of gunshot wounds. The police have said that the motive for the attack is not known and forms part of the investigation. During a visit to the scene on Wednesday, Provincial Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Tony Mtombeni reiterated the stance but added that investigators could not rule out a connection to illegal mining. In our next story, Nigeria's ambitious $11 billion coastal highway promises to transform transport and tourism along the Atlantic coast. But as construction advances, environmentalists, fishermen, and villagers warn the project could worsen coastal erosion, destroy forests, and threaten livelihoods. Stretching 700 kilometers along Nigeria's coastline, the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway is one of President Bola Tinubu's most ambitious infrastructure projects. The 6-lane expressway is designed to connect Lagos, Africa's largest city, to Calabar near the Cameroon border by 2028, with authorities promoting it as a catalyst for economic growth, tourism, and regional connectivity. This is a road that will outlive all of us, Tinubu said during the inauguration of the first completed section. In coastal communities along the route, reactions to the project are mixed. For some residents, the highway has improved access to Lagos and brought new economic opportunities. Fishermen and traders say the road has made it easier to transport goods and attract visitors. But concerns are growing over reports that communities could be relocated to make way for future developments. Residents say uncertainty over land ownership and compensation is fueling anxiety in areas where forced evictions have occurred in the past. The highway's construction has already altered parts of the coastal landscape. Farmer Wasiu Adesanya says sections of his coconut plantation have been cut through by the new road. Fishermen also point to changes along the shoreline, arguing that major coastal developments, including land reclamation projects, have contributed to rising ocean waters and increased erosion. And now let's take a look at the weather predictions. Winter can expect partly cloudy conditions and maximum temperatures of 25 degrees Celsius and minimum temperatures of 10 degrees Celsius. In Rundu, bright, sunny, clear skies are expected with maximum temperatures of 30 degrees Celsius and minimum temperatures of 12 degrees Celsius. Looking over at the coast, partly cloudy conditions are expected in Walvis Bay with maximum temperatures of 24 degrees Celsius and minimum temperatures of 14 degrees Celsius. In Oranjemund, it is quite cloudy. Maximum temperatures will be at 18 degrees and the lowest it will drop to is 11 degrees Celsius. And now it's time for your sports news with Ari Hogad.
Good day everyone, time for international sports news, and starting off with cricket news first. It is Australia and Bangladesh playing a 3-game one-day international series, and it was Bangladesh, the home team, that won the first game in Mirpur. They won that game by 86 runs. First time in 21 years that Bangladesh have beaten Australia in cricket, men's cricket that is. And what happened in the game was Bangladesh batting first, 284 for the loss of 8 wickets in their allotted 50 overs, with Musaddeq Hussain scoring 86 unbeaten runs. Australia scored 191 for the loss of 9. That was in 42.2 overs. That was with the Duckworth-Lewis system that coming into play. And there it was Nadir Rana that took 4 wickets for 41 runs. So Bangladesh winning the first game. The second game of the 3 games will be played on Thursday at the same venue. Continuing international sports news with rugby news. The final of the United Rugby Championship will be played on the 19th of June. That is Leinster that will host the Bulls. Team news at the moment from Leinster is that they're still not certain if 2 key players will be able to play because of injury. It is Dan Sheehan, the hooker, that didn't play against the Stormers in the semi-final. He's still injured and he will be assessed later in the week. And the same for Andrew Porter. He got injured in the semi-final against the Stormers. Then also it is James Lowe, the wing. He will play his last game for Leinster in the final. He's moving on to play in Japan for the Suntory Sun Goliath team. And he started playing for Leinster in 2017 and he scored 101 tries for them. To close off today's international sports news, it is golf news. The men's golf rankings is out. That's after the last PGA tournament that was played and the last LIV Golf tournament that was played in Spain. It was the Memorial Tournament in the USA, and it was JT Poston that won that tournament, and he jumped 55 positions. He's now number 39 in the world. And also Tyrrell Hatton that won in Andalusia in Spain, the LIV Golf tournament, and he's up 6 positions to 21 in the world. World number 1 still Scotty Scheffler of America. World number 2 Rory McIlroy of Ireland. That's international sports news for today. Hope you have a great sport day. We'll talk international sport again tomorrow. Goodbye.
And with that, we've come to the end of the broadcast. I'm Diana Master, and this has been Sunset News. Don't end your day without us.